really why we do Between the Studs shoot.
Yeah.
We get a chance to be on location. We're out here today at the Hanson Gravel Pit. We get to watch the beginning stages of our concrete segment today, which is stone. Now, hey guys, come on, take a look at this.
Come on in.
This is astounding. Now, I have a warning. They told me we cannot touch this. This, if you push this orange thing down, what's going to happen? It will blow up the gravel pit, and we do not want to do that.
Hey, I got a trivia question to ask you.
Okay.
What does every Granite Ridge home include that weighs more than 500,000 pounds?
It's not just concrete, right? No. What would it be?
500,000 pounds?
Probably stone.
Aggregate.
Wow.
Stone. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and that usually comes out to about 15 to 20% of an average home, whether you've got a slab or a basement.
This also equates to almost 60 cubic yards of stone per house.
Now guys, it's a pretty incredible process of how they get this stone to our job site. Behind us here, you got the gravel pit. There's a huge limestone deposit there. And they actually will take that out, crush it to various sizes. So right here's a size number 8. This is one of the more popular sizes we use. They send it to either the concrete mix or send it out to our jobs. And like Lonnie mentioned, there's a lot of stone that goes into our job sites.
And when it comes to concrete, there's really 4 things that make up concrete. That's your fine aggregate, your coarse aggregate, and then the water and cement.
Huh.
You know, and one big thing about like the quarry we're at right now, a big component of that is actually dynamite. And dynamite was actually invented by Alfred Nobel because they were so worried about the nitroglycerin that they were using in the past, and they needed to have it a little more controlled. So he invented the nitroglycerin or the dynamite to be able to blow things up so we can get the concrete today.
So how did we get the Nobel Prize then?
Well, what happened was Alfred Nobel considered himself a citizen of the world because he lived in 14 different countries throughout his life. And when dynamite was actually turned into used as a weapon of war, he felt so guilty about it, he set up a $3 million endowment for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Makes sense. Hey, now this button right here, I wonder if this really does blow this up with dynamite.
Hey, can I touch it? Can I touch it?
Let's try it. It can't really.
No!
I think we're going to go into our first segment. Let's go.
That wasn't good.
Hey guys, we got to start the show. This was really interesting. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Okay, hey, Lonnie.
Yeah, hey, this is great. Hey, welcome to Between the Studs. I'm Lonnie Norris, and this is Tony Reinke, president of Granite Ridge Builders, and this is part of the Granite Ridge Builders team. Thanks for joining us today as we explore the subject of custom building in Northwest Ohio, Southern Michigan, and also Northern Indiana. What are we doing today, Tony?
Well, obviously, one of the biggest parts of building a home is, in the process, is concrete. Stone, as we saw over there. I hope that gravel pit's okay.
That's a heavy subject, Tony.
Before we do, you know, we love history, and I think our audience is really loving the history we talked about.
Yeah.
Let's start out with giving a little information about concrete history. I bet you guys didn't know this. When do you think they invented concrete? 150 BC before Christ.
Wow.
The Romans invented it, and what they did was they found some volcanic ash. They invented something similar to cement. They knew that water, which is hydration, hydraulic cement and hydration, performs on concrete. In fact, that's how they got the Parthenon, that big dome, and poured that. They also did the concrete aqueducts, and I bet you didn't know this. The Romans figured out they could actually pour concrete in water, which is rivers, lakes that they had to cross with their armies, so they could defeat other armies that nobody else could with a bridge. So that's one real interesting. Does anybody know any of their architectural history with concrete?
You know, when you're talking history, you definitely have to talk about Frank Lloyd Wright and
Oh,
concrete.
absolutely.
So on the West Coast, he perfected concrete block. He wasn't a big fan of how it looked. It wasn't decorative enough for him. So he actually invented textile block. So it has a little bit more decoration and better looks on the outside.
He also was known for fallen waters. This was built in Pennsylvania. He used a lot of concrete. So he used limestone for the vertical concrete for the horizontal. Beautiful piece of architecture built in the mid-1930s.
And a lot of the cantilevered over for, you know,
Unbelievable.
it's amazing. And you can actually go there now and see it.
I got another fun fact for you. Did you guys know what Thomas Edison and concrete have in common? Well, one thing that a lot of people don't know is for about 10 years of Edison's life, he gave up some of his inventions like the light bulb, things like that. He went to an iron ore manufacturing place to develop a system to get iron ore out. Well, it didn't go real well. For 10 years, he put his life in it. In fact, he sold most of his GE stock just to make this go. He had a byproduct though. He found that he had cement. He and his men formed a different formula, which this formula today is probably still used, but that formula was Portland Cement, and he owned that company. So, guess what he also built that was huge?
Well, I really like this one, Tony, because Portland Cement actually helped build the original Yankee Stadium, which is in the Bronx. It was back in 1922, which actually saved financially for a period of time the Portland Cement Company.
Yeah, so that was Thomas
And
Edison.
also, he was known for concrete homes and furniture. In fact, he thought that he was going to take over the housing, business by building concrete homes for about 1/3 the price. Then came concrete furniture. That didn't go so well.
wouldn't be
At about
right.
$200, he thought he could furnish a whole home.
But think about that. That was in about 1919 that these concrete
Yes,
homes,
yes.
and I think we're still doing some all concrete buildings, aren't we, Bonnie?
Well, what happened in the mid 50s, it went into an architectural style called brutalism. Brutalism was very popular between the 50s and the early 80s, but they're still doing a lot of it today. Your brutalism is going to be your concrete buildings like your city-county building here in Fort Wayne, I&M, IPFW. Also, a couple of the major universities like Dartmouth has a lot of brutalism in it. The University of Illinois at Chicago has a lot of it. And Brigham Young University in Utah is almost all brutalism architecture.
So this is all raw concrete. We've talked a little bit about it. Now, why don't we, for our audience, let's break down the process of a foundation, what it takes to get there with stone and concrete. How's that?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's break off in a couple of pairs.
They'll let me drive the truck.
Oh, you know what? I want to see how
We got to go on the other side.
All right, Luke, so we're here at a house that is in the form and fill stage, and we've got HVAC and plumbing about to come in here. But when we talk about form and fill, that doesn't make sense to a lot of people. Can you explain a little bit more what that means?
Yeah, so there's two processes here. So you said the form part, the form of the form and fill, is this board right here. And this is the outer edge of the slab. So the slab's going to terminate right here. And the top of this board is actually where the top of the slab will be. So once this is done, this is where our bottom plate will actually take off from.
And so is that where this comes in handy then too?
Well, the rebar is actually, when they're ready to pour this slab, they're actually going to bend this over and bend it over into the slab, the 4 inches of the slab. This is actually down into our footer, so it ties it all together. So that slab and footer essentially become one piece and all works as one system.
And now what's the foam board for?
The foam board is here for our frost protection. This is a 2-inch foam board, it's an R10, and it goes 2 feet down. This is going to help from that winter time when that frost wants to actually drive into the house and you start feeling those cool floors on slabs. This is going to help prevent that.
Now when they're pouring the slab, oftentimes I've seen guys going around with one of these hammers, hitting this around. It looks like fun, but I'm not sure what purpose it serves.
Yeah, good question, Izzy. So obviously when they're pouring the slab, they can work the top surface. They can get that nice and smooth. Well, on this edge here, there's no way to work it because of this board's here. So they're tamping this with that hammer. What that's doing is it's creating vibrations, pushing some of the cream to the outside. So when they pull this board off, you get a nice smooth finish rather than seeing some of those larger aggregate pieces in the mix of the cement.
Well, that's form and fill. What else do we have next?
Well, I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of the plumbing that goes into this. So let's go find Tony D. Tony, why are you unburying that?
I don't know.
Do you know what this is, Tony?
No, I was hoping you would tell me. That's why I wasn't burying it, so I could ask the questions.
This is a question I get a lot from homeowners, especially on that end of this. So this is actually connected to that pipe there, and we call that our sewer cleanout.
Okay.
So we'll actually connect that to the main sewer line running through the subdivision, and then it comes in through the house here. that there is just an access point. In case they ever have an issue with maybe a blockage, gives them a spot where they can actually get to the part that goes to the road.
So if anything's ever going wrong, that's where they can go to kind of fix the problem in the very future.
Yeah, to snake it out. Then that connects to here, which is actually the lowest point of our plumbing that is actually going to get run through the rest of the slab here.
So everything else just kind of runs down to it.
It all flows downhill to this point and then to the curb.
Very good.
Now, I mentioned the plumbing's all going to get run through this slab here, as well as the HVAC. So both of them use a combination of plastic and some metals that they actually, once this is all done, this will look like a big web of plumbing lines and HVAC lines all running to the outside and to various bathrooms.
Now, Luke, I've been asked by a lot of people, do I have anything to worry about running my heating, my air conditioning, my plumbing through the middle of a concrete slab?
That's a very good question, and the answer is no. We're using PVC, and some of you may know, in landfills, they're actually trying to keep out plastic because it's something that doesn't start to degrade. So we're putting the same stuff in here, so it's going to last hundreds of years.
That's good stuff to know, Luke. Hey, I know we had another question over on the other side of this house about how we're going to be forming up some of the garage stuff. So I think we need to go talk to Dave over there.
Yeah, let's head over to Dave, and we'll get into that.
Sounds good.
Okay, Luke, we have a lot going on out here that I need a little bit of explanation on. First, I see there's some extra pouring done, and there's no foam board, there's no board around it. What's going on out there?
Good question. You're talking about right out there.
Yes.
You can see there's no forms on those stakes yet, and that's because that's actually our front porch. So that's outside our building envelope, so you don't need the foam in there, and they have to pour that once the slab is poured here. So that'll be poured at a later date. That's why the form boards are not up there.
Okay. Move over to the garage a little bit. We've got the same thing going on out here. What's different about the garage area?
Again, because it's an unconditioned space, you don't need that foam board running along the garage footer. You can see all the rest of the pieces are there. We still have the foam board, or the form board, the rebar here to tie it all in with the slab, but we don't need this foam, this 2-inch R10 foam running along those footers.
The other thing I'm really kind of confused on is this blue line coming in. Plus it has a wire on it. Is that for my cable?
No, it's a little too early to be worried about cable at this point, but it's a good question. Like I mentioned earlier with Tony D, we had our sewer hookup on that side of the house. On this side of the house, this is our hookup to our main water line, which is running down the side of the street. So this other end of the blue line would actually be out by the curb. It comes in here. It's going to terminate in the garage where your water meter would be located. Now you mentioned this tiny blue line here. That's actually what we call a tracer wire. So maybe you've seen the guys walking around a subdivision with those little yellow boxes that they're running around. That's picking up that tracer wire because we're using PVC, so there's no metal in it. So that tracer wire sends a signal letting them know you can't dig there.
That's fantastic information, Luke. Thank you very much.
So Luke, before we ever start a custom home, whether it's a basement or slab, we do what we call bench the lot. What do we mean by benching the lot?
Yeah, well, benching does two things for us. One, it scrapes all the vegetation, all that grass, weeds right off the lot. So that way you don't have that organic material sitting underneath your foundation, possibly, rotting away. And then what it does is it gives us a nice flat surface to work on. These lots have some variation to them. It gives us a flat surface to be able to build a house up.
We want our foundation to be level.
Yeah.
And the other guys have kind of brought us up to this point, talked about the foam insulation and forming and so on. Now we've got this stone chip in place.
Yep.
What are we talking about here? What are we going to do?
Yeah, so the stone chip here, it's about 8 to 12 inches underneath our 4-inch slab.
Okay.
And this allows our heating guys to run their pipes through, our plumbing guys to run their pipes through, and it just gives us that base to be able to pour on top of it.
Look at this. There is a lot of work to
Yeah.
do this because you have pipes all through the house.
Pipes all throughout the
and
house, so they're
look
going to
how much
They have to
work.
hand dig this generally, don't
yeah,
they?
hand dig it. They go from front to back to side. There's a lot of trenches. It is a pretty labor intensive
Plumbing
project.
lines, the heating lines, and I've noticed also in the winter time this stuff can kind of freeze up, and we're talking about a lot of work.
Yeah, in the wintertime you have to be real careful to not get this to freeze, because if it freezes, it's as solid as concrete. You can't dig through it.
Okay, so we've got the plumbing lines in place, we've got the heating ducts in place, gravel's here. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, so once the heating and plumbing has been inspected, then we bring in another few loads of stone, and then we just level everything out across the entire slab. And then on top of that, this is where the Visqueen comes into
Okay.
play. So this Visqueen acts as a vapor barrier.
That's a very durable, heavy product.
Yeah,
okay?
so you'll see it where it's right on top of the stone and goes across all those mechanicals. So it keeps any moisture from the ground from penetrating up into your house.
Okay. And then we lay down one more thing, right? On
Yep.
top of the visqueen.
So on top of the visqueen, then right here is our wire mesh.
Okay.
And that's very important because your concrete is very good on compressive strength, but not so good on tensile strength. That's movement. And this wire mesh just locks that whole
together,
slab
okay.
all together.
And they kind of pull it up as they pour then, right?
Yeah, so I mentioned our slab's about 4 inches thick. They're actually wanting to get that somewhere in the middle. So as they're pouring, they'll pull that wire mesh up into the slab as they work their way across it.
Okay, and then out comes the trucks and what, 3 or 4 or 5 guys a lot of times?
Oh yeah, at least 3 or 4 guys. They're pouring, getting the concrete spread all across this. Again, it's about 4 inches thick, and then they're working that. They do a lot of different things, which we're going to talk about: some screeding, some troweling, some you name it, some hand troweling, to get this thing a nice, beautiful slab level to build our framing on.
So Luke, here's a quality tip for everybody. One of the biggest secrets to making a really good solid slab is getting this mesh up in. Because a lot of times it will want to go down.
Sure. Yeah,
So you want to get that in the middle.
Yep,
or
in the
lower.
middle. If you get it too
Someplace
low,
in the
it's
middle.
not going to do any good. If you get it too high, it's not going to do any good. You kind of want it in that middle, 1 to 3 inch area. So that way, again, it's locking that slab all together.
That's a really good Granite Ridge quality tip.
It kind of explains too why I think, Tony, you said that the expense of a slab is what percent of the home?
Yeah, actually a slab is almost 15% of the whole price of a house to build. And if you're building it on a basement, it's 20% of the whole value. So it is extremely important to get this right the first time.
It's a lot of work, a lot of coordination.
It really does. A lot of labor, yep.
And Tony's pretty good labor, but I think, Luke, you're paying him about $2 an hour too much.
Yeah, we're going to have to go
Man.
back and do some
All right,
quality
come on, you guys
control.
help me get the rest of this.
I'd cut his pay and starve him out. Let's get out of here.
Guys, wait.
Luke, really, when it comes to pouring concrete, there's really something about that's kind of like an art form, and we don't want to really take chances when it comes to pouring concrete right.
Yeah, you mentioned the chances, and weather in general is one of the things we're always battling when it comes to concrete. You can see like today's kind of an overcast day. Too much of a chance to take
Rain
with the
coming
rain
in, maybe?
coming.
Yeah.
But it's not just rain. There's other factors about
Okay.
weather that can make it maybe not a great day to pour the concrete. It could be too hot or too cold.
Okay.
It could be too windy. That wind shooting across that slab will dry it up too quick, not allowing them to get a good finish on it. Groundwater, it rained yesterday, so that ground moisture will
come
actually
into the concrete?
Absolutely. So there's several factors, like you mentioned. It's almost an art form, and you have to be really mindful of your the conditions around you.
Okay. Well, let's just imagine that we're actually pouring this slab today. And I know there's some processes that take place. Let's talk about those specific processes.
Okay. Well, obviously the first thing is you got to order the concrete. So the concrete
Okay.
trucks are going to drive up there. They're going to start putting the concrete out onto the slab, and that's where the concrete guys take over from there.
How many trucks, by the way, on an average slab or?
Yeah, it could be 3 to 5 trucks for a slab.
That has to be coordinated.
Yes, it has
All
to be
right.
coordinated, and you don't want all those trucks to show up
No,
all at once.
okay.
They need to be, timed
Dumped
out
properly,
Yep,
okay.
Yep. And then our concrete guys take over, and they start what they call the screeding process.
Screeding. Okay.
Yeah, so you can see they got a 2x4, and they actually start pulling that 2x4 across. I mentioned in one of the other is the top of that foam board or form board. That's going to be the top of the slab. So they want to make sure everything is level on there.
That's kind of a leveling process of the concrete.
A leveling, and it gets rid of the excess concrete. So they're pulling that excess concrete in some areas where it may be needed in other areas. And then while they're doing that, that's when they pull that wire mesh up into the slab. So it's kind of a 2-step process there.
Okay, what else?
And then once they get past that screeding point, then that's when they actually have to start working the surface of the concrete. Again, you want a nice smooth surface all the way across for framing, flooring. It just affects everything down the line.
Are they using equipment to do that?
Yeah, they use a couple different things. So they may use a bull float, where you can see they got a float that actually can tilt back and forth, and it's on a long pole, and they're working the top of that concrete. What that's doing is it's driving some of the larger aggregate down and pulling some of the cream to the top, so they can work that again, so they can get that smooth surface.
A lot of times in our homes, we put hard surface right over our concrete, so that's very critical that it be smooth.
Yeah, or they might use a trowel, either a hand trowel or a power trowel, to also work that surface again, just to give it that nice smooth edge, so you don't get any ridges in it or any humps.
All these things taking place to assure a wonderful slab for a customer that's going to give them an incredible experience for years to come.
Yeah,
in a new home.
and all that takes place in about a day's time.
It's amazing.
When it comes to concrete, the process between your driveway and your slab of your home is a little bit different. Luke, can you explain the difference of a driveway?
Yeah, the driveway, there's a few more steps involved. Well, first of all, it's not the same type of concrete. This is actually air entrained, which means we've actually put several bubbles in the concrete to allow some moisture to expand and contract in the wintertime. And then from there, concrete is very much about timing. So there's several timings that are crucial when it comes to the driveway. So as you can see to the right of you, Elizabeth, there's a hand trowel there where they've almost kind of framed the driveway out. It gives it a nice look.
So it's a border, and I've noticed when it's wet out, this border can be a little slippery.
Yeah, exactly. And you have a broom in your hand here, so you can see the rest is actually what we call a broomed finish. And you mentioned when it's smooth like that, it can be very, very slippery. The broom finish gives it a little bit more traction. It's not, it's safe for you and I to walk across barefoot when it's raining or after some moisture's on it.
Now also, I've noticed there's some joints on this driveway and a few other types of joints. Can you explain those?
Yeah, we typically use two different types of joints. You can see the ones here, those are our saw cut joints. Now concrete is going to crack, and we're creating weak points in the concrete to hopefully dictate where those cracks are going to show up. So hopefully those cracks follow those saw cut joints. And then there's another one behind Izzy there that you can see where the sidewalk is. That's an expansion joint. So again, concrete's going to move, and with the frost levels, and that just gives it some area to move so it doesn't crack or create unsightly seams.
And it's got a little black piece there, so you want to keep that there. You don't want to pull it out.
Right. Izzy, what are you doing with
Can
that?
you hustle up? I gotta finish my work here.
Yeah, I don't think this is a good
I got a little more
Let's
work
get
to
out
do
of here.
Watch out.
We're here at Erie Haven with Mark McKenzie, the Quality Control Director, and it's a pretty exciting day and it's a pretty exciting place. And I guess our first question, Mark, is how did you get your name Erie Haven? You've been around a long time.
In 1962, New Haven Ready Mix merged with Erie Materials, so the name became Erie Haven.
They were located in New Haven, so you put the two together.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Now,
Interesting.
Mark, one of my favorite times is the foundation stage of building a house, and with that comes a lot of equipment to help us be able to do that. And one of my favorites is a concrete truck, which we got behind us here.
Right.
Let's go over maybe some of the features of the concrete truck, because I understand that most of these concrete trucks are actually made here in Fort Wayne.
That's
Wow,
correct.
American
Yep. Front discharge trucks, and they hold 10 yards of concrete.
Okay.
From the time the concrete is batched up at the plant to the job, we have 90 minutes to get the concrete off the truck.
Okay, now you mentioned it's front load, so there's other areas in maybe the United States that they actually send out the back?
That's true. There are rear discharge trucks, but they require a chute man, so it takes two people to discharge the concrete.
So it's quite an advantage having these front loaders here in Fort Wayne.
Absolutely.
And also, as I understand it, it takes about 3 loads or 3 trucks to do a typical foundation for us. Is that proper?
Yeah, absolutely.
Luke?
And now once they actually make the concrete up in the truck, how quickly do they need to actually discharge that concrete?
Well, 90 minutes from the time it's batched.
Okay, so an hour and a half they have to unload that concrete.
That's correct.
Man, some of our concrete goes about an hour, so we're talking about a process that has to be very closely coordinated.
Correct.
Now, when I see these driving down the street, sometimes I see that big drum rotating. What do they do using that for?
That's actually what causes the mixing action with the truck.
So the materials go in raw, and then that drum actually mixes it up.
That's correct.
Okay, makes sense.
One more question.
Yes, sir.
Can I drive the truck?
You have a CDL, we're hiring.
Well, there's some other equipment I'm excited to see. Bailey Trucking, who's another close partner, has brought some equipment out. Let's go check that
Check it out.
Okay.
Now, dump trucks and stone might seem like a funny topic for us to talk about, but between the two of us, we have a lot of little boys at home, so we know a lot about trucks.
This is definitely going to be their favorite part of the show. So what do we have back here?
So we have a dump truck and a slinger. So every home, to begin with, uses about 8 to 10 loads from a dump truck and 8 to 10 loads of stone from a slinger.
And that's for the foundation. Now the slinger truck is good for after the mechanicals are in, they use the slinger to actually be able to get the stone a little bit more accurate in spots, and it's for harder to reach areas.
Now these trucks each hold about 20 tons. Each ton is about $15.
$15, so about $300 per load for these trucks here. Now how much do these trucks cost, Elizabeth?
A lot. I think they're about $150,000 to about $225,000, so they're very, very expensive.
You know, so my favorite part here, the slinger truck, it's actually a remote control truck. The driver can get out and move this truck around the job site and also move the arm around too, which I have back here.
And you can shoot this up to about 90 feet. It's pretty amazing. Kayla, I think we should try it.
Okay, let's go.
Nice.
Now, Mark, we're here and you can see the mixing plant right behind us. Now, as I understand it, concrete is kind of like mixing a cake. There's several different ingredients you can use for different type of pours. Now, we mentioned in the show earlier that there's 4 main parts to concrete. You got your coarse aggregate, fine aggregate, water, and then cement. Now,
Correct.
what do we have behind us here?
Well, behind us here we have stone, number 8, limestone.
Okay, so is that your coarse aggregate?
That's the coarse aggregate.
Okay.
And then we have sand, which is the fine aggregate.
Okay. And so these are the 2 first ingredients. Now, how does all of this aggregate get to that mixing plant?
There's a conveyor belt underneath the hoppers here, and then the plant manager basically calls for which hopper he wants to have the material come up. It goes up the main conveyor belt, and he directs which hopper up in the plant or silo.
So the plant manager looks at what kind of concrete's being ordered, and then he'll order a certain amount of coarse aggregate, fine aggregate. Now, why don't we go to the plant over there and see how the rest of it gets mixed?
Okay.
Let's do it. Now, Mark, we're standing in what looks to be a pretty important room. There's a lot of TV screens, computer screens, scales. What do you guys call this room?
This is our plant office that batches the concrete. We get the mix comes from dispatch, and then the plant manager basically batches that concrete up.
So he decides what material goes in and how much of it.
That's correct.
Okay, now I noticed there's a few other screens in here. I can see he's got the weather up. You know, that's always constantly looking at that weather like we talked earlier in the show. Then he's got this other screen here where you can see where every truck is and where all the job sites are located.
All of our trucks have GPS on them, and so they're located. We can tell when they're pouring, when they're done, so it helps out with our efficiencies.
Okay. Well, I can see they got actually mixing a truck here right now. He's getting ready to pull out. So again, about 90 minutes before they got to empty that.
Wow, that's quick. You know what? This has been fun, but guess what? We got to close. Time's done. You want to close, Kale?
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about who we are, what we do, and why we do what we do so well, please take a look at our website, give us a call, or even better yet, come on in the front door. We'd love to meet you.
And you know what? We want to have a big thank you to Erie Haven, all the people that we've been doing this business for 30 years. You guys have been awesome. Thank you so much for letting us tear your place up.
What happens when I push this button right
Oh, wait,
here?
Connie, no! You just no! Wait, listen to this. No, I'm leaving.
I'll make payments. I promise. I'll start next month. What does every Granite Ridge home include that weighs 500,000 pounds?
I'm guessing it's not just concrete. It is
Stone or aggregate or rock. Yes. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Who was after me?
busy.
15% of the mixture in concrete that's actually water. Right? I also have. Did you pass your ass?
Well, we got our blooper.
What do you have for lunch?
I feel better. There you go.
That was a little rough anyway. Let's start over.
Kate's face was great.
Wow. Wow, burritos. When we talk about concrete, we're talking about a recipe. And maybe we should just keep going. I don't know.
So they'll actually step those joists up as they go, giving you that nice box effect, or you know maybe a octagonal. Gives you a lot of different design pick.
It was good.
Lonnie, another good stud step.
So that's what?
This has a beautiful Craftsman exterior, but as you come in, it's beautiful as well. And if
Meal, that's all, folks.